Hello, everyone. It is an honor to have the opportunity to address the 13th Annual Southeast Florida Regional Climate Leadership Summit. Let me start by congratulating you on 13 years of collaboration, coordination, and leadership. Leaders in Southeast Florida have been ahead of the curve in understanding the importance of thinking and acting regionally to address the challenges of climate change. Climate change does not respect city or county boundaries, but you have created the institutional and leadership capacity to act as a region in the face of climate change. So again, I congratulate you all. As a fifth-generation native of Key West, Florida, and having spent my career helping to restore America's Everglades, I am both grateful and proud of my fellow Floridians who are working so hard to protect our beautiful and vulnerable state in the face of this global challenge. We are facing a profound and unprecedented climate crisis, and the Biden administration is poised to take action to meet the moment and avoid the most catastrophic impacts of that crisis. Addressing the climate change crisis will also help us tackle many other pressing challenges of our time, including the ongoing pandemic, economic recovery, and racial equity, all top priorities of the Biden administration. Climate change is fundamentally changing where and how we live. We've already seen the massive toll it can take on human health and our quality of life. In 2020, the United States experienced 22 extreme weather and climate-related disaster events, costing us nearly $100 billion. Climate change has disproportionately affected underserved communities. At the same time, communities of color and low-income communities have disproportionately less access to nature. The Department of the Interior is committed to centering environmental justice at the heart of our efforts to address climate change and promote conservation. This means listening to and learning from affected communities that have been historically overlooked, and also working hard to ensure that more communities of color and low-income communities are receiving the beneficial impacts of nature, including improved physical and mental health and clean air and water. Our climate change strategy will utilize the transformative investments from the bipartisan infrastructure law to build a modern, resilient climate infrastructure and a clean energy future that will create millions of good-paying jobs while protecting the communities and the natural and cultural resources on which we rely. Combating climate change is one of the top priorities of the Biden administration. The President has issued a call to action that we work together to conserve, connect, and restore 30% of our lands and waters by 2030 for the sake of our economy, our health, and our well-being. Also known as America the Beautiful, this decade-long challenge is the nation's first ever conservation goal. And this ambitious goal could not have come at a better time. We currently are experiencing two parallel and interconnected crises of climate change and biodiversity loss. Conserving and restoring the lands and waters we depend on is critical to addressing climate change and the loss of nature. We see the threats to species right here in Florida. America the Beautiful acknowledges the intersection of the climate and biodiversity crises. Natural solutions are some of the most powerful and cost-effective solutions to climate change, as the general consensus among scientists is that expanded nature conservation can help stem biodiversity loss while also playing an important role in climate change adaptation and mitigation. For example, conserving and restoring land and waters can create natural carbon storage and sequestration, or minimize greenhouse gas emissions that might have been caused by land conversion. The restoration of peat soils in the Everglades is a great example of this. Peat soils are one of nature's most effective ways to store carbon. We had a saying on the Everglades restoration team that acknowledged this. We used to say, "Restore the Everglades for Pete's sake." The President's conservation goal to conserve 30% of our lands and waters is a core component of our strategy to fight climate change, and along the way, we'll be able to assess the scope and scale of those contributions as we restore our forests, improve the health of our oceans, and support conservation and restoration work of various kinds across the country. The America the Beautiful initiative is now working with local communities to identify and implement conservation actions which help drive that conservation goal and work toward a more sustainable and prosperous future. We will take a variety of approaches, from working with ranchers and tribes to engaging marginalized communities to building bipartisan partnerships to support wildlife corridors and species that are important to all Americans. Much of the collaboration happening in the Everglades, along the coast, and across Florida to protect species, restore wetlands, and protect nature are exactly the type of collaborative conservation that America the Beautiful seeks to embrace. This administration will continue to build out local conservation that focuses on protecting core habitats, making cities and communities more livable, and driving greater protection of ecosystems for people and species. Governments at all levels have a role to play as we move forward with implementing America the Beautiful and tackling climate change. A challenge as urgent and profound as today's climate crisis requires an appropriate response, which is why this administration has championed the largest investment in the resilience of physical and natural systems in American history. The bipartisan infrastructure law is a once-in-a-generation investment that will help communities tackle the climate crisis while creating good-paying union jobs, advancing environmental justice, and boosting local economies. The law will deliver resources needed by local, state, and tribal communities to bolster climate resilience and protect natural areas. The legislation's historic investments to promote climate change resiliency and protect communities include $8.3 billion in water and drought resilience, $1.5 billion in wildfire resilience, $1.4 billion in ecosystem restoration and resilience, $466 million in tribal climate resilience and infrastructure, $16 billion in legacy pollution cleanup, and $2.5 billion in Indian water rights settlements. The monetary investment of the bipartisan infrastructure law is massive. What I want to highlight is the impact this law will have on the day-to-day lives of people who are facing ongoing fallout from a worsening climate catastrophe. In my role at the department, I hear every day about the terrible impacts of this crisis, from wildfires threatening communities and our national treasures, like the giant sequoias in California, to the historic drought in the West that is severely impacting crops, wildlife, businesses, families, and indigenous ways of life. It is clear that the most vulnerable lives on this planet are bearing the brunt of climate change, even though they are the least to blame for perpetuating it: the poor, the powerless, the young, and the non-human. It is imperative that we do all we can to confront this tremendous challenge. As the Assistant Secretary overseeing the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Park Service, one of the things I take great pride in is our role in preserving wildlife, public lands, and cultural resources for the benefit and enjoyment of future generations. Secretary Haaland is particularly adamant that we must empower our youth to become stewards of our natural resources if we're to be successful in the fight against climate change. I am in awe of the young people who are speaking up for our planet's future, and am grateful for their courage and leadership. It is clear that we are facing some incredibly complex and pressing challenges that will require innovative strategies and solutions. We've made some great progress already, but we still have a lot of work to do. Thank you all for everything you are doing. I look forward to working with you to tackle these challenges together.